Welcome to Dominate Your Day podcast. This is the podcast that adds value to leaders who want to make a difference in the workplace. We believe each person is unique and has a purpose they can live out every day and make an impact in the world. Here at Dominate Your Day podcast, we hear stories from leaders who have used their unique talents to transform themselves and their companies from the inside out.
Okay, well, I would love to welcome everyone to Dominate Your Day today. I am thrilled to have Dr. Ann Welsh with us. She launched her own practice for women and mothers, probably about 12 years ago.
Yep.
And now is working with executives as a coach, as well as a therapist and also a consultant. So welcome to the show, Ann.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, so I love hearing your story. So, listeners, Ann has got some brains. She's from Harvard. So, get ready. I'm like, how did you get all this in this package? I mean, you've got 4 kids, you've gone to Harvard, you've had your practice for over 12 years. How are you managing all of this?
I don't know that I have a great answer to how I'm managing it other than I make a lot of mistakes and I drop balls all the time. And that's kind of part of my message to people is that it's okay to drop balls and to say no to things and to maybe look like a bit of a mess sometimes and to try to do it all at the same time. So it's definitely not perfect. It's definitely messy. And I get a lot of joy out of all the different roles that I do.
Isn't that cool? And I think we all have this different kind of mindset of who we think we should be. I remember when I was growing up, my mom was one of the few working moms. We had all these different people that kind of had role modeled, the Barbara Walters or the different people that were out there working at the time. And now it's women. A lot of women are blending. They're blending their work and their home life. And I hear that from you. And so how did you get started into wanting to be a psychologist? How did all that happen?
Yeah, well, and it's funny. So I grew up with a working full-time mom too. She was a physician. She was a doctor, which
there
was
you go.
rare at the time.
Yeah, very rare.
But I never thought twice about it then, right? It was always like, of course I'm going to have a big job. That's what I saw. I thought it was cool that my mom was a doctor. But I, as a kid, I wanted to be a doctor and had no interest in being a psychologist. I thought, why would anyone want to sit around and listen to people talk at them all day? That sounds super boring. I was really into science. I got into medical school and then I said, actually, I don't want to be a doctor. My parents finally forgave me for that one recently, I think.
Recently?
No, they were actually, I think they held their tongues. I knew they were not happy with the decision, but they were actually as supportive, I think, as any parent in that position could be. So I decided to go to graduate school at that point in psychology. And I originally thought I might want to go into more of an academic setting and do research, but I kind of fell in love with providing therapy and talking to people as I went through that process. And my background was in counseling psychology, which actually has a strong vocational and career focus. And so one of the things I was looking at in my research at the time was career development. So I've always had that kind of piece of what does one's job mean and what does the world of work mean? But the other thing I was doing in tandem was also researching the transition to motherhood, even though I didn't have any kids at the time. And then kind of where all of those worlds collided when I was working at Harvard in university mental health. I loved that job, but I had my second child and I just couldn't do that particular job full time the way I wanted to and parent the way I wanted to. And I asked for flexibility from the university and there really just wasn't any. And so that's when I left to start my own thing and kind of took on a job that I never expected to. I never expected to be an entrepreneur or have a small business. And it's kind of grown from there into these other branches of executive coaching and pulling in more of that career and vocational stuff from the beginning. And then in more recent years, the consulting work too, as I've seen particularly seen people struggle with how to return to work in a post-COVID world and workplaces that aren't really fitting, and wanting to help on that systems level as well as the individual coaching level.
I love that. So you've kind of reinvented yourself along the way,
Yeah.
based on what you were needing, but keeping the same core of the therapy, but being able to add these other
Right.
opportunities for your clients. And then really, it seems like I'm really hearing loud that your passion is around women in executive positions and
Yes.
helping them through motherhood, and as well as leading a team. What have you found, Anne, have been some of the trends you're seeing lately? I know after COVID, we started seeing the quiet quitting and the people resigning, and a lot of women leaving the workplace because they just couldn't, it was burnout. What are you seeing? Is that trend continuing, or is there new trends emerging? Are we too early right now to kind of look at it and see?
Well, I think that I'm seeing a lot of either burnout or kind of on the edge of burnout, and women maybe not knowing what to do next, right? Do I keep pushing? Do I pull back? Do I try something new? Do I try something different? And that new and different might be a new and different job, or do I lean into leadership that looks a little different, right? And how might
Hmm.
that look, right? So I think I'm seeing some pushing on the edges of what we traditionally viewed as
Mm,
leadership, which is a pretty masculine model of leadership, into how do we maybe have a culture of care? How do we have a more flexible workplace culture, a more respectful workplace culture that values flexibility, authenticity, and vulnerability? And if we can make those changes, then maybe everyone can stay, right? Maybe then we don't see
hmm.
the quiet quitting and the people leaving. um, a great example, I think I've seen so many people in the past 2 months maybe, where their firms or their law firm or their company is saying, okay, we're going back 4 days a week now, or 5 days a week, or
Hmm.
what have you. And that's just not working for a
Hmm.
lot of people, and maybe there isn't a great reason to be back that often, or to do it in such a structured way. And so I think that's maybe the pain point right now that people are trying to work through.
Such a good point. And I think it's different by team, by organization,
Totally.
and really having the leadership in the organization to say we're going to lose our people if we don't figure out, because
Yes.
hybrid is here to stay. I don't, we know from Gallup, it's, the research they're telling us now is 1 in 2 people are considering leaving. And that kind
Right.
of pops into what you're saying about they're trying to consider, well, what do I do now? What do I do now to help me be my best self? Right.
Right.
There's also this. I just had lunch with a friend last week. I hadn't seen her in 6 years. I had coached her 6 years ago. She's been a director. And she said, on this whole theme of burnout, what you're talking about is she was burning out and she didn't know it. Her body
Mm,
was just tearing
yes.
down. And she said, I kept going to the chiropractor and I was going in there. And she finally just quit her job. She goes, I didn't have anywhere else to go. And now she's found a new role for herself, but she doesn't want a leadership role. And in this new role, they keep trying to promote her to, and she's like, time out. I need, I just want to be an individual contributor. Is that
Yeah.
what you're seeing? Is that trend?
I think that's one of them, right? Is that, what it touches on is figuring out for the individual, what is it that you value? So, do I want to be management, CEO, corporate, C-suite, whatever? Am I happy being an individual contributor? Is that actually where my kind of zone of genius is? And I don't want this
Mm-hmm.
other stuff. And you're allowed to
Mm-hmm.
make that choice, right? It is an individual choice. But to do that kind of requires enough bandwidth to self reflect. And if you're in burnout or even on the cusp of it, you don't have that capacity. And so in this example, right, it sounds like she stepped back and then was able to say, oh, this is what lights me up.
Mm-hmm.
This is what I get excited about, not this other stuff. And I don't have
Mm-hmm.
to achieve just to achieve. I can achieve if that's what gets me excited. That's great. But if I keep trying to go after things that actually make me miserable, I'm going to be kind of miserable in the end.
And I think that's such a good point, because I think, and this is something we do with strengths and Clifton Strengths work, is helping people find their unique talents and then being able to say, oh, somebody told me this is who I was. No, you are who you're made to be, and let's help you be more of that every day.
Yes.
And what it's giving that permission permission slip to ourselves. I can't talk, to ourselves, to say, I don't have to be that VP or director. I can be this, or yes, I want to be the VP or director, but this is what it's going to take. And so when you talk about values, is that kind of the cornerstone of this, as you're helping your clients really establish what their needs are at that moment? I heard you bring up the values kind of idea.
Yeah, I think, along with that strengths work that you mentioned, right? It's like you need both. What am I good at and what do I value? And if I can find something that's in the middle of those, I'm gonna feel more aligned, right? It's a silly analogy, but when I kind of use the analogy of like wearing clothes that fit for you, right? So if I can put on my, go get my mom's 80s power suit with the big giant shoulder pads, and maybe it fits, but I'm kind of uncomfortable in it. Like, I can walk that corporate walk and I can look that way. I can do the part, and it's maybe always going to feel like I need to adjust it, or it's kind of uncomfortable. And I can swap out to, a big, I don't know, a mini skirt, and I'm going to be pulling it down all day because that's not me either, right? Like, I can do it, but it's not comfortable. And when we make choices that are aligned with our values, it feels like, oh, I can breathe. This is comfortable. And it's not a one size fits all, right? Not everyone needs to wear, I don't know, leggings and a sweatshirt. I'm a jeans and a t-shirt kind of person, right? That's my favorite thing to go to. And that's not everybody's cup of tea. That's just me. But when I know that and I choose that, then there's so much more capacity to take on things, to take on extra things, to take rest, to just kind of reach your potential, because you're not limiting yourself by outside expectations of what you're trying to do. It's just me.
I love that. So how do you help people find their values?
So a lot of times we will do some kind of exploring is the word I would use, right?
Yeah.
Talking through what things bring you joy? What decisions have you felt good about? What decisions have you not felt good about? And I'll sometimes use some inventories, right? I mean, the Strengths Finder is a great one to talk about strengths, and that can inform our values. I'll also use the VIA values inventory assessment, which is another free one, which is great, just because it shoots out like a list that can help you articulate, oh yeah, that fits for me, that resonates, or no, that doesn't. I'll also sometimes give clients just a list of, I've got a PDF with, 100 different things one could value. And we do an exercise where you kind of basically narrow it down. You circle things and then cross them out, and it's more tangible work. And it doesn't have to be, you get it down to 1 or even 5. Even once you have a name of, 10, that's a good place to start with. And you start trying things and using those values to guide yourself.
I love that. I started it's called the Strengths Journal for Gallup, and it's licensed journal, a daily planner based on your strengths. And one of the things I did when I created this in 2019 was, and I published it in 2020, was, know your mission, know your values. Of course, you know your strengths first, then your mission, then your values. And then all this work came out around COVID and everything. And all of a sudden, there was just this reawakening of, oh, here's my strengths and here's the values that speak to me. And oh my gosh, they match. They kind of tie together. And that was just so fun for me and my clients to work through as they started really thinking about their values. But I know for me, and that I didn't, before all this work I started doing, I didn't really think about values that much. I knew I had them,
Yeah.
but I didn't know what they were. And I think it's so, when you're doing this deep work on yourself, I think it's so powerful. So as you're working with leaders right now, and it sounds like you're passionate about the working moms, tell us about that work you're doing with moms that are working and managing it all. How are you kind of helping come in and support as a therapist, coach, executive
Yeah.
counselor? How's that going?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that the starting place with working motherhood is that, I say we're playing a rigged game, right? You can't be the perfect mom and the perfect employee. Those things don't
Hmm.
exist, first of all, and you certainly
Right.
can't be both of them. And
Right.
so we need to kind of scrap those models, like we were just talking about with the values, and say, okay, well,
Hmm.
what do you value? What's important to you as a mother, and what's important to you as a leader? And how are we going to fit those pieces together? So it's really
Hmm.
kind of figuring out an individualized solution that feels authentic. It's a lot of work
Hmm.
around setting boundaries and saying no to things in both spheres, and also around kind of tolerating seasonality, right? That like balance isn't a
Hmm.
state, it's constant movement. So maybe you lean into work for a little bit and you're not as present at home, and then you are at home a little bit more and you're not as focused on work, and that can go back and forth over different seasons. But the other thing I like to help women leaders in particular see, but this is true of any parent, is that parenting is kind of a crash course in leadership. There are skills you gain as a parent. They're super applicable at work. They're not separate silos, right? And so we talk
Hmm.
about kind of the soft skills that people traditionally see,
Hmm.
empathy, I call, the people skills, if you will. I'll talk about the productivity skills. So things like being really efficient and persistent and
Hmm.
patient, and not wasting time. That you have to get things done in a quick way if you're a working parent. And then I talk
Hmm.
about the kind of big picture thinking, the that you have to do, that mental load that we so often talk about with parenting, right? That parents figure out pretty quickly that how to hold the big picture and to execute tasks. They're good at like the strategic planning and the prioritization.
Hmm.
And so all of those pieces are so incredibly important in leadership. And I think sometimes when you recognize that there is a lot of overlap, then again, you can kind of bring yourself to the table in both worlds. It's okay as a mom to say to your kids, I love my job, or my job lights me up,
Hmm.
or even if it's not, I love it today. Hey, I've got to do this. I'm responsible to these people, and I also want to pay attention to you. And
Hmm.
similarly, right, to say to work, I'm going to sign out at 5 o'clock or 4 o'clock, and I'm going to go to my kid's soccer practice, and I will sign back on at 7 or 8 and work another hour. And there's nothing wrong with doing that. You're still following through on your commitments.
Hmm.
And so trying to kind of figure out this way of integrating the two worlds rather than separating the
Hmm.
two worlds.
And I think there is the linchpin right there. How to integrate that and efficiently, so that if you're a working mom and you are doing the soccer thing, and most people are hybrid now. And so they're going to be, folding the laundry while they're talking on the phone, or,
Right.
there's going to be things they're
Totally.
doing, right? Um, but how does the mom find time for herself and her well being? Because I think well being is a big piece right now of coming out. And I'm working with a lot of women right now. We're talking about well being, and I see it's just putting themselves last always. I just had my daughter's a entrepreneur and has 3 girls, and I just said, okay, go get a manicure right now. Go do something right now for you, because I see that they're constantly just giving, 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 and not taking time for them. So what are some good little tips you have for well-being for these leaders, these female leaders that are balancing quite a bit, like yourself?
Yeah. I mean, I think that the there is no hack, right? There's no multitasking it the way that we want it to be. And so I think that's
Mm-hmm.
point number one. And point number two that I often say is like, if you don't do it, you're going to have to do it right? Your body's going to make you do it, right? Like you were talking about earlier, right? If you don't
Yeah.
stop to do something for you, and that thing for you isn't sit on the couch and eat bonbons, right? It might be going to your
No.
doctor's appointments, right? It might be
Yeah.
getting your teeth cleaned. It might also be taking 10 minutes to meditate before bed. What, again, whatever it looks like for you, if you do not take it, your body will make you take it at some point. I think I work with a lot of women in STEM, and we'll talk about it from that academic shift. When you're in college, if your way of functioning is to burn yourself out, you get that winter break of 6 weeks to recover. That's great. That's totally functional, maybe in that world. But we get into adulthood, and no one's coming to say, hey, here's your time off. You have to take it.
Spring
Exactly.
break.
And you have to tolerate that list, whatever that to-do list is, just going to be undone. And you have to take the break anyway. You have to take that time for yourself and ignore that list, because there's no, even if you finish the list, someone's just going to hand you another one anyway. It's not like you get that break at the end of it. And it's hard. I think it's hard for a lot of us to tolerate work that there is still work to be done, and that we can rest anyway. Again, whatever that form of rest or self-care looks like for you.
Oh, good point. And does that go back to when you were talking about boundaries? Like boundaries for yourself, boundaries for your team, boundaries, boundaries, healthy boundaries. That's something else I hear that are hard for people to, just develop if they haven't had that
Yes,
practice.
100%. I mean, it's huge. And I
Exactly.
think sometimes we're better at setting limits for other people than we are for ourselves. But, the way I kind of frame it is to start to think about no as a yes to something else, right? So if I say, if I have a hard time saying no, I have to recognize that if I say yes to this project at work that I don't want to take on, or I don't feel like I have the bandwidth for, that means no somewhere else in my life. That means a no to my time at the gym. Maybe that means a no to sleep. Maybe it means a no to doing something with my kids. And I have to be okay with that. Sometimes maybe I am, right? Maybe I'm so excited about that project, I'm saying, it's okay to put a no there. It's not that it has to be one direction or the other. You just have to be intentional about it. And maybe the answer is, I'm not okay with that. I'm not okay with having to say no to sleep or exercise or my family or whatever in order to take this extra project. So it's going to have to be a no here.
Absolutely. And I think the big trigger you mentioned was the body. Your body will tell you if things aren't right. Are there other triggers that leaders should look for when they're not sure that they're burnout? What are some other triggers that you find that you can help women with? Because sometimes they're so and I've been there, I know.
Yes.
You just get so in the vortex that you don't even know that you're burnout. You're just, and it's good stuff. It could be great stuff, but you just don't know how to pause. Are there some thoughts on that for triggers?
That is such a good question. So definitely the body, right? And it can show up in all sorts of weird ways, right? Like you're getting sick a lot, you're feeling run down, weird things are happening hormonally, right? So that's a great one. But I think the ones that show up quite a bit are, in addition to just the fatigue, are feeling very irritable and short. I think that's a really common one with women. And I think part of why it shows up is because we're starting to get resentful of all of the things being asked of us, but sometimes that's because we're not saying no, right? So it's this really tricky needle we're threading. So irritability is a big one. Or feeling unmotivated. If you're usually like a go-getter, right? If you're usually someone that's like, I don't waste time, I'm always on to the next project, but I just can't make myself get off the couch to do anything, that's definitely a sign of burnout. And anxiety would be the other one, right? Where even little decisions I can't make, right? Because I can't even decide what I want for dinner, let alone, who I have to lay off tomorrow or what project to take on next at work. That if everything feels like it's got the weight of the world on it, I think that's another big red flag.
It's such a good point. Such a good point. And I think too, as you're talking, I'm thinking about the ideal leader you want to be for your team. And that's being vulnerable, sharing, okay, I've got to work on my health, or I've got to, and not acting like Superwoman. Like, I can do it
Yes.
all, because then your team's going to feel like they have to do it all and they have to be available all those hours. And I think that's one of the things I hear is, well, she's on the phone at, midnight or early in the morning. And I'm
Yes.
like, oh my gosh, that might be her time, but because she was with her family earlier. So being able to educate your team about what's going on in your life, so they know that you don't expect them to do that, right? It's that
Yes.
role modeling. And I see that a lot. And I'm thinking it's really the leader that sets the pace, the leader that is opening up. Have you seen that with some of your leaders that have done a really good job of helping their teams really understand that, where they are, and that they don't need to be doing the same hours they're doing, or, looking at work life the same way? They want to encourage them to be themselves.
Yeah, I see it.
Are you
I've
seeing
seen that more, I will say, with my younger clients, right? Like the more kind of
it?
younger millennials,
Yes.
they're much better at
Yes.
saying, I'm out for 2 weeks because I'm going to go camping with my
Mm-hmm.
kids, and I'm not reachable, and I'm not apologizing for that, right? That
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of, we're learning from those that are coming up, but that can kind of trickle upwards as
Yes.
well. Right. But I think you're totally right. The cultural change around being human at work has to come top down, and it has to be visible. And so it is things like saying, if the CEO is able to say, yeah, I'm going to leave on Tuesdays at 3 o'clock because I coach my kids' baseball game, or, you know what, I mean, really vulnerable. I've got a therapy appointment at Fridays at
Mm-hmm.
9 a.m. I will not reachable for that hour. And again, everyone's going to have their own level of comfort with how much they put out there,
Right.
but owning some degree of, hey, I have these work things or have these non-work things that are going to take me away from work, and I'm going to be kind of unapologetic about it and just do it, whatever
That's
it
so
is.
good. One of the other questions I get, Anne, and I'm so glad with your background, I'd love to hear your answer on this, is most leaders aren't feel like they're not equipped to watch for signs of well-being, signs of somebody is not mentally healthy right now, or somebody is not, and so they're trying to manage. And the workplace is, we're in a mental health pandemic in the workplace.
Yes.
And so what, as a therapist, as a psychologist, what would you recommend for leaders as they're looking for the signs of burnout? You've mentioned those. Is there anything else as they're leading their team to help them stay in a thriving environment? And if they're not, being able to help guide them, because leaders aren't equipped for this most of the time. And especially if they're a younger leader, they're still learning everything. And they're like, I don't know how to talk to her about her well-being, or I don't know how to talk to him about that. And so I'm hearing that more and more as we bring more well-being information into the workplace. What are you hearing?
Yeah. I mean, and I think it depends on the organization, right? Because if you're at a Southwest, right, something huge, there's
Mm-hmm.
HR, and I often will say, like, talk to HR about, bringing in programming, bringing in
Yeah.
workshops, making sure that everybody has information about access to EAPs so that they can get therapy if they need it. You can bring in psychologists or even coaches that will do kind of wellness trainings, right? All of that on a big picture level. But if you're a founder or you're a startup or just a smaller
Yeah.
organization, I say that from a leadership position, you don't want to get into the role of therapist, but that you can make it
Right.
okay for them to say, hey, I'm struggling a little bit, and to say, hey, I'm noticing that, I don't know, maybe you haven't been able to make it into work every day. Is everything okay? And to still be able to point them to resources. Even maybe you're so small that it's you and three other people. I mean, right? You
Mm-hmm.
don't have any
Right.
EAP, but to say, like, if you need help accessing some support, let me know and I will help you figure that out. And so that you can still be a human and um, offer that support or offer resources without worrying about
Mm-hmm.
having to take on that role of therapist or getting too much information. Um, that's kind of I know that it's
Yeah.
more general advice, but that's where I would
No,
start.
I think that's good. And I think the other part on top of that is just learning to listen, right? As
Yeah.
and not being transactional as a
Yeah.
leader. So what are some of your recommendations that you would have for leaders just listening and learning empathetic listening, even if they don't have empathy in their top 10 or,
Right.
they,
Right.
it's like, okay, I need to listen and pay attention right now.
Well, and that listening in and of itself, right? I mean, we could do a whole
See,
podcast on
thing on
listening,
that, listening.
but,
Yes.
it is I'm going to listen and be present. So if someone's telling me something hard and I'm thinking about my grocery list, that's going to be, they're going to pick up on that, right? That on that detachment. And so I'm going to
Hmm.
listen and not fix. So I'm just going to listen and take in this information and then maybe ask what they might find helpful. Again, you don't have
Mm,
to be the therapist in this role.
right.
That wouldn't be healthy or helpful, but to try to understand what they are saying from their perspective and then to think together about what a next step
Mhm.
could be.
I love that. I think that active listening, it's so hard, but it's so powerful
Mhm.
now. I see that so much more now, even just starting a meeting, just instead of, okay, let's do this. It's like, okay, how are you today? What do you
Yeah.
need today? And at the end, did you get what you needed? Is there anything I can support you with? And I think those are the things I hear now more in the workplace than I have in the past, from really good leaders. So I love all that you've shared today about just even when you're not yourself, it doesn't feel right. That was so powerful. And being able to really talk about everything from active listening to being able to talk about well-being in the workplace and what it's like to be a working mother right now in a hybrid situation. So I love the fact that you carry kind of three hats that you wear with your clients. So as we're getting ready to close down, is there anything that I didn't ask you that's coming up for you right now, as we get ready to close out?
I don't think so. I think, one of the things that we were talking about before the show is just how much the strengths work, um, is important. And I think even just in this last part of the conversation, as we're talking about this mental health at work pieces, to your point, you
Mm-hmm.
don't have to have empathy as one of your strengths to learn it. It's a skill that you can build, just like any of those
Mm-hmm.
other strengths on that list. And so, as a leader, if
Mm-hmm.
you feel like this is not one of my top five, maybe, I can still
Mm-hmm.
build it to be a more empathic leader. And I can still
Yeah.
learn to kind of create a culture of respect and care at my organization. And if I need help with that, then ask a coach, right? That's what we're here for.
Mm-hmm. That's right. I love that. I'm glad you brought that up because I think people say, "Oh, I don't have my empathy's low. I have high individualization, so I like to customize. So I use that to help me." So it's figuring out what do you have that can help you as you're building your empathetic listening ear. So I'm so glad you brought that up, Anne. One thing I also want you to mention that you shared with me in our pre show is that you are creating a new community.
Yes.
So in January. So tell us about that.
Yeah. So one of the things that I've noticed is that a lot of women, as they kind of, especially as they get to the top, it can be kind of lonely. And so I wanted
Hmm.
to create a group coaching program, and I may be playing with additional groups in the future, but this first initial one that I'm launching in January is for working mothers, and I think it's going to be a group of a bunch of high achieving moms who want some support and some community. They want to maybe feel balanced, more intentional with their choices, more proactive, more present. And we're going to talk about some of the things we talked about today: values, boundary setting, playing to your
Hmm.
strengths, and building confidence, and doing it all in this really connected group of women that also get it. And so I'm pretty excited about it. I mean, I love one-on-one work and coaching and therapy, and I'm keep doing both of those. But this is kind of a unique experience to get to do it with a group of women who want to support each other in it.
I love that. There is such a need for that. I went to a dinner last night with just women, and we meet 4 times a year and in person. And it was so life-giving just to have conversations with other women. I'm here in Dallas that are working and that are in different stages of their life, and to learn from them. And I'm so glad you've created a community for that. So how would people find out about that, Anne? If they're interested in
they
that.
can go to my website, and right now I just have kind of a very, very basic intro page, but it'll be coming soon, and it's called the Working Mother's Lifeline, and so they can just click on that and get the link, or they can shoot me an email. My website is www.drannewelsh.com. It's the same, Dr. Ann Welsh, at LinkedIn as well. And if anyone's an Instagram person, I've been playing with that over the past couple of months, and that's at dr.welsh.coaching.
Well, I love the fact, Anne, that you have not only wear this amazing hat of being a psychologist, but you're also a mom, a wife. You also are working with a lot of different women and helping them through your coaching and consulting. So thank you. And thank you for creating this group for the women in 2024 to come and just have a lifeline. That's awesome. So appreciate you being on the show today. And we look forward to hearing more from you in the future. So thank you for being here.
Great. Thank you so much for having me. I loved it.
You have been listening to Dominate Your Day podcast. If you're ready to transform your life and workplace from the inside out, go to danawilliamsco.com and set up a discovery call. We would love to connect with you and equip you with some helpful resources. Thank you for listening today, and please take a moment to subscribe to Dominate Your Day wherever you listen.